It is Friday night. It is time to talk Raiders football. Welcome back, everybody. Silver and black tonight here on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio in Southern California, and coming to you also via the interwebs on YouTube or wherever you may be watching us. So if you want to see us, you can do it there. But if you're listening to us on the 50,000 watt boomer that is the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio, thanks for being with us. We are Southern California's only all Raiders talk show. Scott Gulbransen, Moton with you. We're going to get into the Raiders talk real soon here, starting out. But I want to remind you to make sure you subscribe to the show. If you're listening to us over the air, that's great. You can listen to it on, of course, the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio, but you can also listen to us on your favorite podcast feed. So if you can't get to us on a Friday night for some reason, what you can do is subscribe to the podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get it. You can also play it on your smart device at home, whether it's a Google Home or an Amazon Alexa. Just say the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio, and you'll be able to hear us there as well. Make sure you follow us on Twitter as well, at SNB Tonight, as well as Mo, who is at MOEMOTON. That's Mo Moton, and I am at LV Gully. There we go. You got it all. You can follow us now. You can talk at us, and we'll listen to you, I promise. On tonight's show, we're going to start out in this first segment. We're going to talk about Josh Jacobs. That's right. He is going now into year 4. That means the Raiders have to make a decision on his 5th-year option coming up, or do they sign him to a longer-term deal? So we're going to talk about that, debate that, the pros and the cons. In the second segment, our alter ego for my favorite co-host of the world, and that is Mr. Moton, who joins me now on the video if you're watching, and on the air. We bring out, you put on your special headgear, and you become Mostradamus, right? And so Mostradamus is going to talk about the Raiders wide receiver situation in a piece he wrote this week up on Sportsnaut.com, where you can read him. Mo is also the national NFL writer at Bleacher Report, so you can listen or watch him and his work there as well. So Mo, Mostradamus is gonna come from the ethos down to the rest of us mere mortals and tell us what the Raiders are gonna do about wide receiver.
Yeah, I promise I won't go big time on you guys. I won't put my content behind a paywall or anything. So it's out there for everyone. If you want to siphon it, if you want to take it and use it as your own, all good. I'm not a selfish guy, so feel free to just check out my columns, and it's all good.
Yeah, what do you mean? People take your work and then kind of repurpose? Nah.
I don't think anyone would do that and use it as their own. We're all good people out here. We wouldn't do that, right?
The best for writers these days, Mo, and I know you've happened to this, and I write stuff up on sportsnaut.com. Oh, by the way, for those of you watching on TV, I'm wearing my brand new Raider Ramble t-shirt. If you haven't visited RaiderRamble.com, good friend of ours, Mario Tovar, who also now, Mo, is a colleague of ours at Sportsnaut, because Sportsnaut is growing faster than the crisis in the Ukraine. And I don't mean to make light of that, but I'm just saying. And so I'm wearing my Raider Ramble, so shout out to Mario. But I've seen that. We've all had that happen to us, where you write something and then somebody takes it and turns it into like a false rumor, or turns it into another piece about, hey, you know what we're thinking over here at ABC website is they should go after Brandin Cooks.
You know, I was going to tweet yesterday. I was going to say I tweet for the people who don't want to have opinions of their own. So, you know, if you're scared to have an independent opinion, I'm your guy. You know, I can kind of ghost tweet for you, and it's all good. I won't take any umbrage with it.
No, that's right. But Mo, we're gonna get into this first debate coming up here in just a second. We're gonna talk about Josh Jacobs, and I want to get into that. But I think let's lay out first a little bit about where Josh Jacobs is at this point. You go back, and I'm looking off to my side here because I'm bringing up my contract stuff. Of course, when the Raiders signed Josh Jacobs as their draft pick, their first-round draft pick out of Alabama, they signed him to an $11 million deal, right? And you look at what he's going to be able to, or what he's going to cost the team, very, very inexpensive. I think it's $2 million for the 2022 season. The Raiders have to make a decision on him on whether or not they're going to exercise that 5th-year option. Now, Mo, everybody knows the talent that Josh Jacobs is. There's no questioning his talent. The problem with him during his first 3 seasons has been the ability to stay on the field. The Raiders were so concerned with it that, again, he was injured this past season, and they cut back on the number of carries to keep him fresh, to keep him on the field. That's not optimal. When you look at Josh Jacobs, from your opinion, and you diagnose his upside versus his downside, what's your initial thought? And we talked about this several weeks ago, but I want to get it again. What's your initial thought on, if you're the Raiders and you're now Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, the new leadership in the Raiders organization? Where are you with Josh Jacobs as far as, do you exercise that option? And then number two, are you thinking maybe you commit to him longer?
I definitely would exercise the 5th-year option. And I say definitely because I believe the Raiders need him for balance. Because and I know that he would have one more year if you don't exercise. He still has that 4th year, but I think he could be a 15 carry guy and get 20 touches a game. Because if you look at his numbers, back-to-back years over 1,000 yards, not over 1,000 this past year, but in his first and second year, over 1,000 yards rushing. He improved every year as a receiver. I believe he had 54 catches this past season. So he's a complete back. The only question, as you just mentioned, is can he stay healthy through a complete season? It's shown that he gets nicked up a lot during the season. So you're going to have a solid number 2 back, and that's what the Raiders tried to get out of Kenyon Drake. Unfortunately, I believe he fractured his ankle, didn't finish the season. But with Jacobs, I believe he could be your lead back. You just need a decent number 2. You don't need a 1B type of running back. Just a solid number 2 could step in just in case Jacobs misses 1 or 2 games here and there, misses a down here or there. Somebody to fill in those gaps and spell him.
Yeah, and we talked about it during the season, Mo, and I want to revisit that conversation about Josh Jacobs. And I agree with everything you said. I mean, there's no questioning he can be, at times, number 1 back and one of the top in the NFL. In fact, our good friend Marcus Mosher, an NFL writer, pegged Jacobs as number 14 in his top 50 running backs. But you look at the concerns with durability, and you brought it up to me on a show during the season this year where you said, remember, this is a guy the Raiders drafted to be their bell cow, but in college he did not get that many snaps. Now, they positioned that during the draft, and Gruden and Mayock and when they drafted him, to say, well, that's great because he doesn't have a lot of tread off the tires, right? But on the flip side of that was he didn't show the durability, so you didn't really know what you're getting. So now we've seen it. So then you have to think to yourself, exercise the 5th-year option, and I'm actually in agreement with that, because next year, as I finally brought the contract numbers up here, by the way, he's a dead cap hit of about $3.8 million, and it's about $2 million cash that Josh Jacobs will get next year, $2,122,000 to be exact. That's cheap, especially for a guy with that talent. So you kind of make it a contract year and you say, okay, listen, you need to stay healthy, and whatever that takes. And with some players, they just can't do it. But if that means extra weight room, if that means extra conditioning, whatever it may mean, you got to take the cheap running back. If Kenyon Drake can come back, I think both those guys come back. But when you look at Josh Jacobs from a long-term perspective, there's people out there, Mo, who believe that the Raiders should commit to him long-term. To me, there's no reason or upside to doing that other than if he goes out next year and runs for 2,000 yards and 23 touchdowns, okay, then you're going to have to pay more than you would have had you paid this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't say invest in him long-term right now. And I just wrote down the 5 names of the 5 running backs who averaged the most money, as AAV, annual average value, over the years. So these are the top 5 running backs annually. Christian McCaffrey just signed an extension recently. Has played 10 games in the last 2 years. Ezekiel Elliott, a lot of people are saying Tony Pollard is now the better running back in Dallas. His rushing yards per game has dropped every season he's been in the league. He's down to 58.9 in this past season, 2021. That's his career low. Alvin Kamara got in trouble in Vegas before the Pro Bowl. Just signed an extension. Dalvin Cook has missed 8 games since 2019. Hasn't played a full NFL season. Derrick Henry just missed 9 games this past season. Returned for the playoff game against the Bengals. Lost, averaged 3.1 yards per carry in that game. Those are your top 5 running backs in terms of annual value. So you're saying, okay, pay your running back. But history shows you that with the exclusion of Alvin Kamara, because his situation is different, these guys, they play a physical position. They get hurt. So technically, you're going to need a number 2 back anyway. Why would you pay top dollar amount for a running back? It's the most disposable position on your roster.
No question. And Mo, well, let me ask you this too, because we had this question. We asked for some questions on Twitter. By the way, what a week on Twitter! Just craziness. People need to just chill. But I'll tell you, we had a question there. It was about Josh McDaniel's offense, and I'm going to adapt that question to the discussion we're having right now here on Silver and Black Tonight, which is, if you look at the offense and what we know from Josh McDaniel's offense in New England, and you look at the focus on the running back and what they do, in some ways, I believe that actually helps the case for Josh Jacobs, because you're not looking for that power back as much as you do in some of the other offensive sets that you see around the NFL. Talk a little bit about the role of running back in Josh McDaniel's offense and how Josh Jacobs and a Kenyon Drake might fit into that.
Right. So with Josh McDaniels over the past, I would say 5-6 years, number one, he hasn't had a running back over 1,000 yards since LeGarrette Blount in 2016. He had 1,161 yards, 18 touchdowns, but that team was third most in total carries. So they relied a lot on the run. I believe Brady missed 4 games because of a suspension. It might have been the Deflategate that year. Could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson were the 2 backs this past season. It was Damian Harris and Sony Michel in 2020. It was Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead, James White in 2019. It was Sony Michel and James White in 2018. Deion Lewis and Mike Gillislee in 2017. Do you notice a pattern there? Mm-hmm. He usually has a featured back, maybe not going over 1,000 yards, but a featured guy who gets most of the carries. I would say anywhere from 13 to 15 carries per game. And then he usually, as I just said, has a number 2 back who can fill in the gaps. So I think this is where you fit it into, the Raiders' situation with their running backs. You have Josh Jacobs be your lead back, getting 14 to 16 carries per game. He'll get a couple of targets, not a couple, but maybe 3 to 4 targets per game in a short receiving game, screen game. And then you have a number 2. Now, will that be Kenyon Drake? I think because of his dead cap, it could be Kenyon Drake, but I wouldn't say it's a slam dunk that Kenyon Drake is back, because if they let him go, they only save $2.75 million, which is not a lot in the grand scheme of things. But if you can get a running back for under $1 million to do the same thing that you would have got Kenyon Drake to do, I think they might consider it, even though they'll have to eat $5.5 million in dead cap. The ideal scenario there is if you can trade Kenyon Drake and you'll be out of his contract, which I don't think is going to happen, because no one's going to pay $8.2 million.
8.2, yeah.
So it's not going to happen.
Well, and Mo, if we look at that situation, so you're right, and there's going to be a lot of guys on the market that they could pick up of similar caliber, I think. But then there's also the draft. If you look at the draft class and you look at running backs, you can usually get some good serviceable running backs that you're talking about here that could be a second back for the Raiders behind a Josh Jacobs. Anyone stick out for you amongst the youngsters coming out of college this year that you could see the Raiders maybe get later in the draft?
There's a guy I've been talking about a lot on Twitter, Dameon Pierce. Not really. I mean, he's kind of like a Jacobs, where he didn't have a bunch of carries at Florida, but he doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires. They can catch out of the backfield. He had a good showing at the Senior Bowl at the beginning of the month. Caught a pass, had some good runs. I think, and if he falls to the 4th round, or if he's at the end of the 3rd round, I would look at him. As far as free agency is concerned, I know a lot of people would prefer a younger back, as you just suggested, but Giovanni Bernard, if he's available for a cheap price, I would go and get him, because McDaniels and his offense, he usually likes a really good pass catching back. And over the past years, that's been James White or Deion Lewis.
Correct. And that's what I was going to say to you was if I'm looking for a veteran, with a rookie, it's a little bit more of a development issue unless somebody's just really stellar as a pass catcher. But there's guys who make their career off being that back, right? And the Raiders have had several of those over the last several years too. And if they're looking for somebody to up that game a little bit, especially with people. I'm going to tell people who don't like Derek Carr right now, if you hate the checkdowns, if you watch the Patriots offense, get ready for checkdowns, baby. Yeah. Get ready for passes out of the back. Now, I love the swing passes that the Patriots use so often out of the backfield as well that you're talking about. So if we're looking at running backs there, then certainly you have to look at veterans that are going to be on the market that fit that bill. But when you look at Josh Jacobs, just to kind of start as we have a few minutes left here, Mo, in this segment, when we talk about Josh Jacobs, back to him, I'm going to assume he's back in 2022 without a doubt, and that they exercise that option. Now, if we look at what he can do, what is it about Josh Jacobs, do you believe, that has given him the most trouble to stay on the field? Is it his style? Is it just his size, his frame, his past of not being kind of that pounding running back? Because he seems to get stronger as the game goes on, but yet now the Raiders are limiting his carries so that he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, I think it's just some guys just get hurt. And like I said, running back is arguably the most physical position on the field. So if his run style just is not conducive to longevity, because he's not afraid to take hits and he'll get the extra yardage. He'll push through contact, and all of that is great. But if you can't stay healthy, then you want a guy who's going to make guys miss versus guys who's just going to absorb contact and try to push extra yardage. But you want that heart in your running back, and you want that quality in him. But as the Raiders will probably do, they'll just probably lessen his workload so that he can play through a full season.
I'm gonna make the case right now that he needs to call you, and he needs to get on the avocado smoothie diet. If he got on the avocado smoothie diet from one Mr. Maurice Moton, he might get a little healthier. I'm just saying. And maybe if he stayed off Instagram a little more, he would,
oh, my God.
He wouldn't get hurt.
Get off my lawn, Scott Gulbransen is
here.
here.
I told you. You called me old last week. Poof. Poof. All right. Yeah, so that's it. And I think the Raiders, they have lots of other issues, and we're going to address. By the way, we started with Josh Jacobs. We're going to talk about wide receiver here in a minute, which won't be the first or the last time, or it will be the first time, but not the last time. Excuse me. But as we move along during this offseason here on the show, Mo and I are going to go through some of these positions, especially those that are of need. Now, I know running back wasn't a big need, so per se, like some of the other positions on the team, but I do believe that was a good place to start. And when we come back from the break, what we're going to do is we're going to break down wide receiver. We're going to talk about Mo's piece this week where he gave us a name of a guy he says is part of the answer, at least one of the answers, as we look at that issue for the Raiders when it comes to wide receiver and what they lost last year. And it's become an issue with Bryan Edwards not panning out like they thought he would, all of that stuff. So we're going to address that when we come back from the break and talk about that. But Mo, I have to tell you too, when you look at the running back position and you look at the Kenyon Drake situation, and you talked about his contract with about the minute we have left here. His injury, that ankle, it was a higher ankle injury. That's tough to come back. I don't know that he'll be ready for the beginning of the season either. And
that's why I brought up the issue that I don't think it's a slam dunk that he's going to be back. And again, I know they'll be caught with $5.5 million in dead money.
Yeah.
But I think if they can get a cheaper option and still save $2.75 million, which is not a lot in the grand scheme, but I think if they feel like they can save, I think they will. So it all depends. But I think even if he is back, you draft the running back on day 3 because he's going to be the next guy up after Kenyon Drake's contract expires.
Yes. Well, but they got to draft the quarterback first. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, you just lit up Twitter. You just lit up the live chat.
I'm not mentioning the name today. I'm just not. We're not doing it on this show. We're not talking about. Yeah. By the way, did you see that tweet? I guess it was in New York. Some guy was injecting his own blood into food or something, and he was wearing a Derek Carr jersey.
Derek Carr, I saw that.
I'm like, this poor guy does nothing to do with this. I mean, he's an NFL player, but it was pretty funny. It was a moment of levity around that subject on Twitter this week, which was really fun. But oh well, let's go. But the good. I know. Well, because you're there. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to step aside here on Silver and Black tonight here on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. When Mo and I come back on the other side of the break, we're going to switch gears into high gear, right? Because that's what the Raiders need. They need that deep threat. They need some wide receiver help. Mo Stradamus, if you don't know who that is, that's the future-telling version of Mo. So when we come back, we're going to talk to Mo Stradamus about what answers the Raiders could find at wide receiver. You're listening to Silver and Black tonight, only here on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. Don't go anywhere.
Everyone knows when it comes to NFL football, Raider Nation is the #1 pro football team in SoCal. Disagree? Tough. Talk Raiders every Friday at 6 p.m. on Silver and Black Tonight. Only on the Mightier 1090 AM.
Welcome back. Silver and Black Tonight. Moton, Scott Gulbransen with you as we bring the show to its end here in another 20 minutes or so. So we welcome you back to Talk Raiders football on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. Hello to everybody on YouTube and Facebook who are watching the video. Thanks for being with us. Don't forget, subscribe. Visit the website, silverandblacktonight.com. Make sure you read Mo on everything NFL up on Bleacher Report. He also writes his Raiders-specific content up on Sportsnaut. So make sure you do that as well. We're going to switch gears now. We talked in the first segment about the running back. We talked about Josh Jacobs. You can see over my shoulder here if you're watching on video, this cool board. I don't know who this artist is, but they're pretty good. Anyway, so we talked about Josh Jacobs. We talked about running back. Now we're going to switch gears, talk about wide receiver. We all know what happened last year, unfortunately, with the Henry Ruggs tragedy and the situation there, losing that draft pick and their speed demon down the sideline. They went out, got Deshaun Jackson with mixed results, not really what they wanted. Bryan Edwards continued to be inconsistent. Zay Jones had his moments, but he's not a number one or a number two wide receiver. So, Mo, when we think about the Raiders and their needs at wide receiver, you came up with a name that I liked, and before all of these other websites started saying, hey, Mo's got a point, let's write a story about it, you talked about Brandin Cooks. So we're now talking to Mostradamus, so we get the crystal ball going. We got to get a crystal ball there for you in New York so that we can have you kind of rub it when you do these segments. But seriously, Brandin Cooks, the Houston Texans, of course, we know the background, the Los Angeles Rams, his years there. Talk about Cooks, his positives, why you think he would be a good answer, someone that the Raiders could go out and grab and instantly fill that need at wide receiver.
Well, beyond the obvious, everyone knows that Brandin Cooks played for the Patriots while Josh McDaniels was there. I believe it was the 2017 season. But if you look at his resume, he's a very underrated. And I just saw someone yesterday say, well, he's not our number one, so the Raiders shouldn't go after him. And it's not about having a number one, because how many times have the Patriots had a number one wide receiver under Josh McDaniels? Like, most of the time it's been Rob Gronkowski and Julian Edelman, who's basically one of the best slot receivers I've seen in my lifetime. But anyway, with Brandin Cooks, obviously, he has the Patriots ties, but if you look at his resume, gone over 1,000 yards with 4 different teams. With New Orleans, who drafted him, went to New England for 1 year, was in with the Rams, had Jared Goff, went over 1,000 yards with Jared Goff. Can you believe that? Then went to Houston. Houston acquired him with Bill O'Brien acquired him. Went over 1,000 yards with Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, who's a rookie, as his quarterback. So this guy has shown wherever he goes, he fits in and he produces. To me, that's a guy I want on my football team. Now, some people have brought up he gets nicked up, and he has kind of the Josh Jacobs effect where he doesn't miss a lot of games, but he gets hurt. And I believe he has he's suffered 5 known concussions in his first 6 seasons. So that's something to worry about. But what I will say is, for the price that the Rays will have to pay to acquire him, I would kick the tires on him, because the Houston Texans will have to still pay him $7.5 million in dead cap, even if they trade him. So that means the Raiders will have to take on the remaining $8.7 million per over the cap. So for $8.7 million for a wide receiver who can get you over 1,000 yards and be a lead wide receiver, not necessarily a dominant number one, but can get you 1,200 yards with a Derek Carr, I would take a chance with him and acquire him for probably a 4th round pick. That's probably what it would cost the Raiders.
And Mo, the thing about Brandin Cooks is, and for those of you watching on video, we have some highlights running of him, is not, to your point, if people don't want to call him a true number one, I would argue that in the NFL, really, with the exception of a few guys, I mean, there isn't a number one anymore. The way the offenses are and the way they spread the ball around, that's not it. You find role guys who fit certain schemes, who fit certain play calls, and those are the guys that go out and do it. You have Hunter Renfrow in the slot, but what I like about Cooks is his hands. I mean, yeah, is he the fastest wide receiver out there? No, but Mo, this guy has sure hands, and to me, he can hit the speed a little bit, so he's going to give you that vertical game. But man, you get the ball to him in the vicinity, and he's going to bring it in.
Right, and that's the other thing you just mentioned with Derek Carr in the first segment, was there are going to be a lot of short passes in the Josh McDaniels offense, and he can take a pass that's a short routine 5-yard catch. And he could turn that into 15, 20 yards because he still has some burners. He's not quite 30 yet. I believe he's 28, 29 years old.
Right.
Still has the speed on him. He could still stretch the field in that way, but he's versatile in the way you can get him on the short passes and you can throw to him 15, 20 yards down the field.
Now, Mr. Nostradamus, is he the guy? Obviously would fit well, I think, in that offense, to your point, and Derek Carr would use him effectively, I believe. But is that the guy? Is that the number one guy in your book per your column that you would go after if you're the Raiders? Because there's another guy you talk a lot about. That everybody is now this week is suddenly on the bandwagon as well, which is Allen Robinson the second, of course, from the Bears, who a lot of the folks on the Raiders, in Raider Nation wanted to go out and get before. Between an Allen Robinson the second and Brandin Cooks, who fits better? What are their similarities? What kind of sets one above the other?
I would prefer Allen Robinson only because you don't have to give up draft capital for him.
Right.
He's got to pay him whatever the market says, or not whatever he's going to get. Now he's coming off of a down year because he was with Andy Dalton and he's with Justin Fields, who's a rookie. So he didn't have a lot of production, didn't have a lot of targets that last year. So get him at an affordable price. Now, Cooks probably fits the offense a lot better than Allen Robinson because, as I said, he has the experience with Josh McDaniels. He has more of the speed that you want because with the Raiders wide receiver core, you have Hunter Renfrow, who's not overly athletic. He does bring in the football. You have Brian Edwards, who you're not sure about. The Raiders need some speed. So I think Brandin Cooks is a great fit in that sense. But Allen Robinson is a bigger wide receiver, I believe about 6'2", 220. But he's a reliable wide receiver. A lot of people say, well, his numbers say he's inconsistent. If you pull up Pro Football Reference, his numbers are up and down. And this is why I say you got to look at the context. His quarterbacks were Blake Bortles, Mitch Trubisky, Andy Dalton, and Justin Fields, I just mentioned. And he still went over 1147 in yards in 3 of those seasons. Led the NFL in touchdowns in 2015, I believe. So if he has a Derek Carr, if he has a capable starting caliber quarterback, he's going to get you maybe 1,300 yards if he's the go-to guy. So I would prefer Allen Robinson over Brandin Cooks, who, again, has that concussion history. So if he gets hurt, you're a little nervous about him.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the unfortunate part. I've seen some discussion even amongst analysts who cover the NFL about whether Allen Robinson is still the same person or same receiver that he was. I argue he is. To your point about that ridiculous dysfunction they've had in the Bears organization and at quarterback just didn't benefit him. I mean, he's lost there because there's nobody to get him the ball. So I understand. There's some other free agents that I want to run by you too, Mo, as we talk about wide receivers for the Raiders. Mike Williams, Chris Godwin. We're talking different money there, but any of the two of those guys fit in well with what you think Josh McDaniels is going to do in Las Vegas?
I think Chris Godwin would be the better fit. Mike Williams, I'm still not too impressed with his route running and his efficiency. He has one season with a catch rate above 59%. He only has one season with more than 49 catches. So you're talking about aside from this past season with Justin Herbert, he's getting about 3 catches per game in the other years. Yeah. So it's not a guy I would pay big money to, especially coming off the free agent market. If you're going to pay a guy, it wouldn't be Mike Williams because he's probably going to get a lot of money hitting the market. I would say Chris Godwin, but the only thing with Chris Godwin is he tore his ACL in late December. So I would prefer him on a long-term deal because he has time to recover. If you're going to get him on a 1-2 year deal, I'm not too fond of that because he may not be the same player as first year back.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you on Godwin. I just think, though, I liked your Cooks thing. I had not thought much about Cooks until you wrote about him, and certainly I think that's a great fit. And you look at, again, his sure-handedness is what I love about him. But, yeah, Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, to me, from a free agent standpoint, would be the guys that I would go after as out of the Raiders. Now, that doesn't mean they'll win out. There's other teams who have the need as well. Their price may drive up depending what happens. Now we look at rookies.
Scott,
yeah, go ahead.
Scott, really quick though. One name I want to mention really quick. DJ Chark, you name that.
Oh yes, good point.
A lot of people should circle his name. He had a Pro Bowl year in 2019 with the Jacksonville Jaguars, 73 catches, 1,008 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's 6'3", about 200 pounds. He's more lean, but he has a lot of speed and he can get vertical.
Yeah, that's a great point. And he's a guy that a lot of people have been very excited about. But again, Jacksonville. Now they were excited. Lawrence got down there, and of course, you had Urban Meyer and that mess, and it just never worked out. So sort of a lost year of development for Trevor Lawrence, who had his moments, though, don't get me wrong. But we look at the draft, we look at young guys. Of course, a guy that a lot of Raider fans have been talking about, a lot of folks think he's a good fit, and that's Treylon Burks from Arkansas. A guy I really like is Chris Olave from Ohio State, right up the road from me here in Columbus at Ohio State. Those two guys, now Olave is a shorter guy. He's only 6'1", but you look at Burks, 6'3", 225, and then the third guy I'll bring up to you, Mo, and you can give me the comment on all three of these, is Drake London from USC, 6'5", 210.
Wow, big guy. But I actually like all of those names, but and I'll break them down really quick. Treylon Burks, and I thought this was an interesting comparison. Somebody compared him to Cordero Patterson, the Falcons version of Cordero Patterson, where you can throw the ball to him and he can also take some carries. I believe he had 38 rush attempts, 222 yards and a touchdown at Arkansas. So he has some versatility, averaged 16 yards per catch at all three of his terms at Arkansas. The only thing with him is he's more upside than polished because he has to refine his route running, specifically on the shorter routes. As we've mentioned multiple times, that's a big thing with Carr. You got to be able to catch the short passes. If you can't do that, you're going to have a problem, especially in Josh McDaniel's offense. Chris Olave is a guy I think fits most with what Josh McDaniels wants to do, because when I think of Chris Olave, I think polished route runner, smart, knows how to find holes in his own defense, and I think that's what Josh McDaniels would want. The only question about him is, can he consistently beat press man coverage? Because as you say, he's a little bit slight, a little bit lean, but he is a touchdown machine. 32 touchdowns over the last 3 seasons. I think he compares close to Brandin Cooks. Maybe not as fast when Brandin Cooks was coming into the league, but smart. Again, knows how to find the holes in the defense. Drake London, to me, he's a mix of Michael Pittman Jr., who also went to USC, by the way, and Mike Williams. Big guy. People are wondering, can he be an outside receiver? Is he more of a big slot? He could do both because he has experience at both at USC. Fractured his ankle in October, but he should be fine. If you're worried about Brian Edwards, I think Drake London would be a fine pick. People are a little worried about, because wide receivers that size usually don't amount to a lot in the NFL. I know you got some big physical wide receivers, but 6'5" is on the tall side. But he compares closer to Michael Pittman Jr., but he's a little more versatile because, again, he can line up outside, and he can line up inside in the slot.
Well, when you look at, again, we're gonna get we got a few weeks before we really get heavy into the draft here on Silver and Black tonight and what the Raiders may do, and we'll have some guests on to talk about that. But you look at Burks, you look at Olave. These are first round guys, right? I mean, for the Raiders to grab them, they're going to have to use that 22nd pick to do that, and that's weighing in the fact that they need offensive line help and there's other needs there. If one of those guys is there in the first round, with knowing the Raiders' needs, are both of those guys good enough, Mo, that you would take them in the first round? Because they won't be there if they don't.
The two guys that I would take if they're there, definitely Olave, because I think he's actually pro ready too.
Yes,
I think
I agree.
Between the polish and his route running, I think he's ready to contribute right away despite his size. As I mentioned, Treylon Burks that's more of a projection pick. You're hoping that he becomes better than what he is right now, because again, he has to refine a lot of his technical skills. So if you're picking him at 22, you're hoping that the growth comes quickly. Drake London, I would take also because I think he could contribute right away. The only thing with Drake London, again, as I said, is, is he more of an outside guy? Is he more of a slot guy? Because, you got Hunter Renfrow there and you want that, You want that mix. You want them to mesh. But Chris Olave to me, would be the number one pick there at 22. If he's there, I think you have to pick him unless you really like an offensive tackle who could be your starting right tackle for the season.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll go through that in the coming weeks, because I think we do need to weigh kind of that draft class, right, of offensive linemen, knowing the Raiders need a lot of help there, and that's a priority, along with, by the way, defensive backfield. People are forgetting about that again. The Raiders need help in the defensive backfield, and they're going to have to do a mix of young players and free agents again.
I actually think cornerback is at play at 22. A lot of people are not talking about this, and I tweeted this, that there's not enough talk about cornerback. I don't think Casey Hayward is back. So if you don't have Casey Hayward, you're not going to start Amik Robinson. He struggled when he got his spot start duty there. Yeah. Who do you have there? A lot of guys are coming off the books, and you're not going to have an in-house replacement for Casey Hayward.
No, and I think people are just a little shotgun shy because of the Damon Arnett pick. And look, we still don't know about John Abram, right? We don't know what's going to happen with him and if he's going to make it. I know he made progress this year before getting hurt towards the end of the season, but he is nowhere near what they thought he would be. And that's not criticizing the guy overly. It just is true. Okay. So I think that the Raiders, that's the tough part. It's a mixed bag, Mo, right? Because the Raiders are going to have opportunities, and Dave Ziegler's going to have a quick opportunity to put his fingerprint all over this team in a rapid fashion. But their needs are so specific and widespread, even though they're a very competitive team, that you're going to have to weigh that. And this draft is a little weird. I mean, in some ways, it's great that there's not that many great quarterbacks because you're not going to be tempted to go that direction early on. But the Raiders are going to have to weigh the need to protect their quarterback, especially if they do sign, which both of us believe will be an extension for Derek Carr. You got to protect your quarterback. You saw the Bengals get to the Super Bowl and lose because they couldn't do that. So we'll see what they do there. But there's a lot of competing needs here, and where the Raiders start will be very, very interesting.
And of course, free agency might dictate that. So let's say the Raiders sign a big time wide receiver, chances are they're not going to draft a wide receiver at 22 because then you'll have your big time wide receiver out of free agency. You'll have Hunter Renfrow. Right. And we'll see what happens with Bryan Edwards, but then also Darren Waller's out there getting a lot of targets. So you're not gonna use a premium pick on another wide receiver. So we'll see what free agency what happens to free agency, and then that'll tell us what they'll probably do in the draft, especially in the first round.
And Mo, the one thing I wanted to talk about too, we shift a little gears to the league in general. We saw this week the NFL, actually late last week going into the weekend, talk about the Combine, which I know you're going to be busy next week covering the heck out of. And the Combine, they were going to put all the players in a bubble, and there was all these restrictions. Then the NFLPA, which doesn't represent these kids yet, but will, and then all of the agents got together and protested, and the NFL changed gears on that. Talk a little bit about the Combine. I mean, if you look at the Combine, they've tried to make it now, and the reason they relented on it was not only the pressure, but because it's become a TV event now. The Combine used to be nothing. Nobody cared about the Combine except for scouts. Now it's become a TV event where they sell advertising just like everything else in the NFL, surprise. But talking about that, what happened this week and why the sudden shift from the NFL who had no cases of COVID throughout the entire playoffs is suddenly going to put all these kids in a bubble in an already tough situation where they work the heck out of them anyway?
Yeah, so basically the players wanted access to their full teams, their trainers, and everybody around them. And the NFL is like, no, we want you in a bubble, and there's limitations here, there's restrictions. And the NFL basically budged because they don't want to mess up their TV product. As you just said, I remember growing up, no one cared about the Combine. No one talked about the Combine. No one talked about somebody's 20-yard shuttle and their broad jump and their vertical jump. And it's, as you said, it's become a TV event, and it's become a time where now we could talk about these athletes just doing their best in basically a virtual job interview. But if you know the NFL and you know how things work, the most important thing aren't these workouts that you see on TV. It's the medicals. It's what you don't hear about in these interviews, because a lot of people go, why didn't this team draft this player? And a lot of times it has to do with what happened in those interviews and those medical records. Those are the important things. What you see on TV is I don't want to say it's not important, but it's mostly for show.
Well, and we'll get next week here on the show, Mo, we'll get some of these guys we talked about, like Treylon Burks, like Olave. We'll get some feedback from you on the Combine and see how that goes, and how the Combine, some of the players that are kind of, at least from the personal, I should say, the public perception on the Raiders' radar, we'll get their opinions or your opinion on them and get some, because I know you'll be covering it heavily for Bleacher Report. But it should be interesting to see what happens with that and how this continues too with COVID and all this stuff. We seem to be coming out of it now, and we'll see how it all impacts us. But Mo, we're surprisingly already out of time. I can't believe another Friday has gone by, and I certainly appreciate you hanging with me and talking about Raiders football. And there's nobody better, folks. If you're not reading Mo, make sure you do that up on Bleacher Report and up on Sportsnaut.com. My friend, we will talk again next week, and you'll combine us from here to eternity.
I definitely will. Also, I have an article out, Raiders free agent targets, that's out. If anyone out there listening wants to steal those ideas, it's out there on Sportsnaut. You read me over there as well as Scott Gulbransen, so check it out. A lot of good stuff there.
That's all right. That's Mo Moton, the 5th best sports NFL writer in the United States. No, I'm just kidding. He's the best. Are you kidding me? He's awesome. But I appreciate it. Remember, too, that you follow us here on Silver and Black Tonight. Listen to us every Friday night. Share it with your friends. Subscribe to the show on the podcast feed in case you miss it on Friday nights. Also, check out silverandblacktonight.com. You can get all of the show archives there, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you know when we're on here live talking on video. We certainly appreciate that. Follow Mo on Twitter at Mo Moton, MoEMoton. I am at LV Gully. We appreciate you guys being here. We will talk to you next week, Raider Nation. Take care and have a great week.